and we will get underway. So, what today's class um, is a class titled Lions and Hikers and Bears. Oh my. The purpose of this class, the reason we teach this is so people have a much better understanding of these two animals that they could possibly encounter. And hopefully, with a better understanding of them, you'll have a much safer, much more enjoyable time when you're recreating outdoors. I am going to be your main presenter today. My name is Daryl Radijak. I am a wildlife biologist. I'm also a large carnivore specialist. And to give you an idea of my background, just so you know that the information we're presenting is not just a fly by the seat of your pants type of presentation. All of the instructors at Wildlife for You, we do come with a wealth and load of experience. And so a little bit about myself. I am a lifelong lover of wildlife, and I do have a passion for bears and other large carnivores. But that doesn't qualify me to teach you about these animals. And so what does qualify me is I do have a degree in wildlife management, which I received in 1992, and it was from the, get ready for this, State University of New York College of Environmental Science and Forestry. It's a really, really good college for wildlife and forestry. But if you've never heard of it, just understand it's part of the Syracuse University. It's on their campus. After I received my degree, one of my first jobs that I took was working at a place called the Appalachian Bear Center. Took that job in 1997, and what I did there is the National Park Service or the Tennessee Wildlife Resources Agency, they would bring me orphan bear cubs, and we would raise those cubs to be released back into the wild. Obviously, there's a trick and a neat thing about rehabbing black bears. You don't want to have any human contact with them because they are going to return back to the wild. This particular picture was a cub that we were fostering to a wild bear mother, so it wasn't going to be raised by us. But that's where I got my start. That's where my passion for working with bears grew. That facility is now known as the Appalachian Bear Rescue. They're still alive and well if you want to look them up. Fantastic organization. They're located in East Tennessee. After I did that, that got me my start. I then began working for the Tennessee Wildlife Resources Agency, which is the state wildlife agency for Tennessee. Because of my experience at that Appalachian Bear Center, I was soon promoted to be the black bear coordinator for the state of Tennessee. And I did that for about 7 years. So instead of working with individual bears like I was at the Bear Center, I was now managing black bear populations in the entire state of Tennessee. For some reason or another, the director of the agency saw something in me, and he promoted me to the chief of wildlife and forestry for the state of Tennessee. Did that another 5 years, and it was an awesome job. Instead of being over the bears and other large critters in the state, I was then over all wildlife for the state of Tennessee, which was awesome. But I was in a suit and tie more than I was in the field. And so I got an itch to fulfill a lifelong dream of moving and living out west. And I've been in New Mexico for the last 3 years, still doing wildlife biology stuff, this being one of them. But just so you know, I have over 20 years of working with black bears and other large animals. I do have some cougar experience as well. And so the person teaching you today should know a little bit more than the average Joe when it comes to these bear and cougar encounters. So with that, let us get started. Title of the class, remember, Lions and Hikers and Bears, oh my. And that oh my is a really big thing because people oftentimes say that if they think about having a bear or cougar encounter. And the question we are having this entire class is, should we be afraid of having one of those encounters? So what I'm going to do, I'm going to start off by putting up a picture. And this picture is going to be of the deadliest animal in North America, the animal that accounts for the most fatalities in the entire continent. And so you take a look at this picture, and you tell me which one of these is the deadliest animal in North America. Now look closely because I hope your answer is that one on the bottom left. You see there, because if you look at the statistics, look to see what's going on in North America, you'll soon find out that over the last 50 years, bees are responsible for more fatalities annually than any other animal in North America. Now, if we expanded that worldwide, it would be mosquitoes because they transmit diseases in those third world countries. But here in North America, bees usually account for more fatalities than any other creature that we could encounter out there. And so if you look at bears and cougars combined, you're looking roughly at about 2 fatalities per year in the entire continent. And so when you think of it, you look at those statistics, you're about 25 times more likely to be killed by a bee than you are to be killed by a bear or a cougar. And so what we want this class to be, we want to teach you how to be smart, not how to be afraid. There's no reason to be afraid, because with statistics like that, nobody's out there being afraid to go hiking because there's bees out there. But I can almost guarantee there's some folks out there that are afraid because they don't want to encounter a bear or a cougar. There's no reason to do that. So with that, let's talk about things. Why are we even talking about these bear and cougar attacks, especially now? Now, we did schedule this class about 6 weeks ago when there wasn't much going on in the news. But as most people know, there's been some situations in the news within the last couple of weeks. We've had a fatality by a cougar up in the state of Washington. We've had an incident in Great Smoky Mountain National Park. And just yesterday, there was another incident in Wyoming involving a grizzly. So these animals are often in the news. People read about it. The thing is, news travels much, much faster nowadays than they did 20 or 30 years ago. And so people are they may be more concerned because they're reading about more and more of these instances. Now, here's another thing. I can almost guarantee everyone on this webinar tonight loves the outdoors. They love going hiking, camping, backpacking, fishing, you name it. They love the outdoors. And where do most of those people like to recreate if you love the outdoors? Well, if you look at the list of these fatal, now this is just bear attacks, you see that they occur in a couple of special places, national parks and national forests. That's where most people who love the outdoors go to recreate. They're either on a national park, national forest, or some other public land out there. And so the fact of the matter is that these instances with these bears and cougars, a lot of the folks, like I said, sitting in on this class, they love being where those bears and cougars tend to be. And so that's one of the reasons we're talking to you tonight. But let's put some reality. Everything we always present is based on reality and science. But I also want to put some perspective in there too. But if you look at statistics, and a lot of people start looking at these things because it starts to become a growing concern with them. So let's look at the number of fatal attacks that have occurred in North America. And let's look at bears. We'll start with black bears. And don't even think about the numbers. Just look at that trend line to see, and you can see an increasing trend in these number of attacks. And just so you know, this is based on decade, going all the way back to 1910, and it goes decade by decade all the way up to our current point in time. So you see the number of black bear attacks is increasing. How about grizzlies? You also see that it has that growing trend line. Now, if you combine those two, which is going to be this red line, this is bears total in North America, you can see this trend, this increasing trend. It's almost like an exponentially increasing trend. And it is, and there's an explanation for that. But we don't have 2010 in there because we haven't finished this decade yet. But if you look to see what's going on in this decade, as far as the number of fatalities with black bears and grizzlies, we're on course to pretty much stay on that increasing trend. Now, why is that? Obviously, it's because there's more and more people recreating in the outdoors. But this is what I love, and this is what most people don't understand, is the number of bears out there has been increasing as well. A lot of people think bear populations are dwindling. Bear populations are actually doing a whole lot better now than they were 50 years ago, 100 years ago. So you have humans increasing, bears increasing. Obviously, you're going to have more and more of these instances. So this talk's not just about bears. We are going to talk about cougars, and if you look at their trend, it's not as bad as bears. Cougars account for way less number of attacks and number of fatalities. And simply because of the events of this year, we have 2 fatalities due to cougars. Prior to this year, we didn't have any this decade. And so cougars are much, much less likely to cause an incident with another human, but it does occur every once in a while. So here's the perspective. Remember, bees are 25 times more likely to cause you harm than any of these bears or cougars. But I hope this graph shows you there is a need, because there is this increasing trend. There's a need for more knowledge out there, and that's what we're going to do for the rest of tonight. So this whole talk is about how do you recreate safely when you're in bear and cougar country. I imagine most of you are hikers or love going camping in the backcountry. Now, everything we talk about tonight is not solely about the backcountry. You could live in bear and cougar country. You could have a cabin somewhere. You could be around your house and still find some usefulness in the information we're given tonight. So, if you want to learn how to recreate in bear and cougar country, there's a lot of great information out there. You can go on Google and type up, what do I do? And you're going to have Bear Aware, Bear Smart, Bear Wise, all these different organizations that try to tell you what to do in bear and cougar country. They're great. They're fantastic. I'm not going to put any of them down. But what a lot of those organizations do, they give you these lists. They'll say, all right, when you're in the backcountry, you should do this, 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 and that, and don't do this, 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 and that. And depending on what animal you're dealing with or where you're at, it might be a different list. It's a lot to absorb. And so what this class is going to do is try to tell you or teach you how to synthesize all this information so it becomes second nature. You don't even have to think about it anymore. And so when we started putting this program together a number of years ago, it suddenly clicked on a better way to teach this. And so if you ask yourself the question about how do you recreate safely in bear and cougar country, it boils down to this. And this is really simple. You just ask. I have worked for federal and state governments, and they love acronyms. I hate acronyms, but this one actually works, because once you understand it, it's really simple to remember. It's going to make you safe in pretty much any situation you find yourself in. So what does this ask mean? Well, there's 3 things. And this acronym stands for, you have to identify the attractants, you have to know what to do to stay safe, and you have to be knowledgeable. And so what we're going to do is we're going to walk you step by step through all of these things. And the good thing with this ask, if you know how to identify those attractants, you know what to do to stay safe, and you're knowledgeable about that animal, the best thing about this acronym, it's very succinct, it's easy to remember. And the best thing, it applies in all situations. So this isn't just for bears, it's not just for cougars. It could apply to coyotes, to raccoons, to bees, to skunks, to you name whatever animal. You just use this ask principle, and you'll know exactly what to do in every single situation. So let's dive into this and break it apart, and we'll go letter by letter. And then at the end, we'll bring it all around, and you'll like, oh my gosh, that makes so much sense. So let us start with this very first. Now it's not going to be the first. Got to start with the K, the be knowledgeable. It's really important, because what we mean when we say be knowledgeable is if there's an animal out there that you're afraid of, whether or not it's a cougar, a bear, a coyote, a bobcat, any animal that you're afraid of, you have to learn about that animal. The more you know about that animal, the more knowledgeable you are about that animal, the better you're going to understand the situations you find yourself in with that animal. And so I'm going to take some time because I'm going to teach you about bears and cougars, because an informed public is not just smarter, it's a whole lot safer. And so we're going to spend some time learning about both these creatures, these bears and cougars that I promised you. And so these are the two subjects for today's class. If we ever do another safety class with another animal, we're going to go through this exact same thing. But because this is lions and hikers and bears, oh my, I'm not going to teach about hikers, but I am going to teach you about lions and bears. So let's start with the cougar. And it's best if everyone knows a little basic biology and behaviors of these animals, because that explains the predicaments or the situations you might find yourself in. So basic biology. Just real simple stuff. We're not going to go into too much detail, but if you're looking at the size of these animals, they're very, very large cats. They're the largest cats we have in North America. And so mature males going to weigh probably around 150 pounds, could go much higher. Sometimes you get them over 200 pounds, but that's very, very rare. But compared to your house cat, which may only weigh 5 or 10 pounds for a big cat, these are very, very large cats. Females are generally much smaller than the males, and so again, you're still looking at a very large cat if you're looking at a 100-pound, 120-pound female. So that's what you're dealing with the size of these creatures. Now, understand they do have large home ranges, anywhere from 75 to 150 square miles. The reason their home range is so large is because they're following the food source. And you'll find, in fact, I'm going to explain in a little bit, that these cougars pretty much feed solely on other animals. They're carnivores, and so wherever their main food source goes is where they go. So if they're going after mule deer or elk, which tend to migrate, they could travel quite a large distance just following their food source around. Now, they are active year-round. The reason I tell you that seems like a no-brainer. But the other animal I'll teach you about is bears. They're not active year-round, so I threw that in there. And we won't go into bear hibernation too much, but it helps understanding that you are liable, or you may run into a cougar anytime throughout the year. Midwinter, midsummer, doesn't matter. Those cats are active and they're hunting. They have tremendously keen senses. I'm sure most of you that have a house cat are familiar with cats. They're extremely aware, whether or not they can hear stuff, see stuff, smell stuff. They detect things far and above than anything that we do. Now amplify that, because that's what these cougars do. They're so aware of their surroundings. They know what's going on before we have any inclination of what's going on. And so that's going to lead us to something that's really important to understand and know about cougars. They're true carnivores. And literally what that means, they depend on meat. They have to eat meat. Unlike a bear, which is an omnivore that can eat both plants and meat, cats will only eat meat. And it's generally fresh meat. So let's talk about this behavior, because this is kind of what makes them an animal that you got to be mindful of. Being a true carnivore means they survive solely on meat. They will eat a little bit of other stuff, but for the most part, their entire diet consists of other animals. And so, like I said, their entire diet is almost all meat. Now, understand, when we are talking that they eat meat, most of their diet, about 80%, will consist of ungulates. Ungulates is a nerdy biological term, means hooved animals, and so for the most part, they're eating deer, whether it's mule deer, white-tailed deer, or elk, which is also in the deer family. So the vast majority of their diet consists of those animals. Now this will vary by region. So if that cougar lives in an area where there's a lot of bighorn sheep, it'll shift to sheep. Sometimes they could take antelope. But those large animals is pretty much their primary diet, 80% in most cases. Now, they will make a kill. They try to. They don't do it all the time, but they'll try to make a large kill about every 7 to 10 days to sustain them. And so if they can take a deer down every week, every other week, that's pretty much what they're doing throughout their lifetime. Now, understand that a lot of their diet, not a lot, but a fair amount of their diet will consist of other small mammals, so snowshoe hares, mice, anything that they could get their hand on. They'll even feed on coyotes if they could capture them. And so, again, You're looking at ungulates with a deer and elk and rabbits and smaller critters. Pretty much their entire diet is consisting of meat. So here's the big question. This is what everyone's concerned about. Do they feed on humans? That's a tough one. Well, it's not a tough one. Humans pretty much are not on their menu. Now, totally understand that there's been some instances within the past year where humans have been killed by cougars. But the reason I say they're not on their menu is you look at how many cougars reside in the West, and humans are in their habitat all the time. We are hiking, we are recreating, we are in areas where cougars exist all the time. I promise you, without a doubt, every single hour of every single day, there is a human within range of a cougar all the time. If humans were on their menu, if we were a main menu item for a cougar, every single morning we open the newspaper or turn on the internet or TV, we would be reading about more human fatalities. But that's not happening because we are not on their primary menu. Now, understand that every once in a while something crazy happens and we do have a fatality that's attributed to a cougar, but that is an exception and not the rule. So I hope you understand that humans are not part of their diet. For the most part, cats will run whenever they encounter a human. We'll explain more about that. Now, I will tell you, they do have a very distinct hunting style. And again, this will help you understand what you have to do and why you have to be so mindful when you're hiking in cougar country. Now, their hunting style is they're an ambush predator. They lie in wait and they pounce at close distance. Unlike, say, wolves, which are a pack animal, wolves will run an animal down. They'll wear it down. They have multiple animals chasing it. They just run that elk or moose or caribou or whatever animal they're hunting. They run it down until that animal is about worn out, and then they move in for the kill. Cougars don't do that. Cougars are what we call ambush predators. They can't run long distances. They are like the fast sprinter as opposed to the marathon runner. And so what they'll do is they'll lie in wait until one of their prey sources, which is typically a deer or an elk or another large four-legged creature, gets in range, and then they strike. And what they do is they pounce on that animal quickly, and it could be a much, much larger animal than them. You see this picture here of a cougar actually taking down a bull elk. But they go for the jugular, and what I mean by that is usually their primary attack point is that neck, and they're either going to do a bite to the back of the neck, the base of the skull, to try to crush a vertebra to cause paralysis, or oftentimes they go underneath the jaw where they're trying to pinch off that trachea and suffocate that animal quickly. And so that's their hunting style, and oftentimes you can look at a kill or a carcass and find out what took that down just by the bite, as long as it's a fresh carcass, by where it was attacked, where these cougars will go for that neck area really quickly. Another thing to remember, and this is a behavioral thing that will help you understand what you have to be mindful of, these cougars will cache their prey. After they make a kill, they'll eat a little bit, but they drag it to a safe spot, and they usually partially bury it, or they move it to an area that's less conspicuous. They don't want to be feeding on something in the wide open, and so oftentimes they take whatever animal that they killed and they move it off into a more obscure location to do the feeding. So these are all important. I'll tell you why they're important here in a second. But just understand, these cats are designed to kill. That's how they survive. Being a true carnivore, they're extremely, extremely effective predators. So when you're in cougar country, what do you look for? Obviously, you want to pay attention to know if a cat's in the area. And so they leave tracks. And most people should know what a cougar track looks like, but there's a track out there that is often confused. And what I mean by that is a cat track as opposed to a dog track. They can be somewhat similar, and they're often confused. So let me show you. This is a wonderful diagram that shows the difference between a cat track and a dog track. Now let's start with the thing you look for first and foremost. So if you encounter a track that's on the trail, the first thing you should look for are, I don't know if you can see my pointer, but the claw marks. If you see claw marks above each toe, in almost all situations you're going to be dealing with some type of canine, whether or not it's a coyote, a fox. Some of you joining in from the Pacific Northwest, they have wolves in those areas. So if you find that four-toed print that has claw marks in it, more than likely you're dealing with some type of canine. Now that's not always the case, but the reason being, when a cat walks, it retracts its claws. And so when they're walking or running, you should not get any claw marks. But here's the other thing. If you want to double check, and this is awesome, if you look at the main pad, and again, if you look at the main pad on this domestic dog, you can see at the top of the main pad, it forms a single hump. Whereas if you look at the cat track or the cougar track, that main pad has two humps. And if you look at it, it almost forms the letter M. And it's really easy to remember, because if you see that M formation in that main pad, you can think meow for cat. And so those two things should be able to help you differentiate if you find a track and you're trying to tell if it's a cat of some sort or a dog of some sort. Two easiest things to look for. Now, I will tell you, I love Google. Google has information at your fingertips that you can find really quickly. Problem is, Google doesn't always have good information. Reason being, I Googled cougar tracks or mountain lion tracks, and this is what popped up for mountain lion tracks. And you can see in this top picture, you have claw marks, you have claw marks, you have claw marks. None of these with the claw marks are cat tracks. They're not mountain lion tracks. And so, like I said, Google is a wonderful thing as long as you know the source of information. And not most of the time, but there's lots of times where they give you bad information. So just be mindful of Google. So what other things can you look for? If you find scat, understand that any true carnivore like a cat is going to consist, their cat scat is long, tubular like this, but there's going to be lots of hair in it. Any carnivore that's eating and consuming other mammals is going to have lots of some remains from other animals within their scat. And then these scratching posts or kill sites we'll talk about in a second. Now, what do you do if you have a close encounter, or what defines a close encounter? And I underlined encounter because usually what we describe as an encounter is something where you're close enough that either you're going to impact that animal's behavior or that animal is going to impact your behavior. So if you're hiking and you are overlooking a valley and a half mile below you see a cougar or a bear or something walking through the tree line, that's not an encounter. That's a wonderful sight to see, but it's not what we would call an encounter because there's no interaction between the two of you. Now, you do have to be mindful if you do have an encounter with a cougar, because there's some specific situations you got to be careful about. And so, first and foremost, you don't want to surprise a cat at close range. And so you walk around in a heavily wooded area or someplace that has some tight corners. You don't want to surprise a cat at close range. Got to be mindful of that. Another thing, if you're hiking, especially if you're in a rocky area that could potentially have some den sites, you find some cute little kittens curled up in a den, and you're in cougar country, it's probably not a good idea to stick around that den site. Another thing, and this is a big one, when you're out hiking, if you encounter like a fresh carcass, whether or not it's a mule deer, elk, any other kind of animal that has freshly been killed and is partially buried, that could very well be a kill site for a cougar, and that cougar's not going to be far away, so be mindful of that. And last but not least, and I always got to bring this up in these safety talks, is more and more folks love hiking or recreating with their dog. I do too. You probably saw a couple of my dogs wander in the background. I will never ever tell you do not take your dog, but just be mindful that a dog could amplify a situation. Now, I will tell you, for the most part, especially if it's a larger dog, they're going to chase a cougar away, and that cougar is going to tree or run away from a dog. Cats generally don't like dogs. But if it's a small enough dog, that could turn into a bad situation where that cougar, instead of being threatened by that dog, might see that dog as a potential meal. And if it chases that dog and that dog runs back to you, imagine what you're going to have on your hands. And so all of these situations, whether or not you surprise it at close range, you're at a kill site, or you have your dogs with you, understand, remember, that behavioral aspect of the cougar. They're always hunting. That's how they survive. So any of these situations could turn predatory, where the cat tries to figure out if it could potentially have its next meal. But all is not lost. Don't worry about that, because I'm going to teach you about reading their body posture and then how do you react to them. First off, you have to understand, when you're dealing with a cougar, it's a cat. If anyone has a house cat or knows anything about cats, you know their curious nature. Something piques their interest, they're automatically going into stealth mode. Now, I will tell you, cougars don't like being around humans. They're afraid of humans. They usually run the other way whenever they detect a human. However, if you're in an area where the cougar has not run away, that should kind of pique your interest, because for the most part, that cat should be heading the other way. So anything other than a hasty retreat should alert you. Now, understand what they're going through. Whenever they're trying to size up their next meal, they're in this predatory mode. And so if you see a cat that's staring at you from cover, that should alert you, obviously. Any type of sneaking or stalking where they stay low, crouched to the ground, again, that's an indication that they're in this predator mode. So this crouching, just like you see in the picture, sometimes their ears will pin back. Again, that's a sign of a predator when they're really getting ready to make a move. And then just like the house cat, you might see the tail twitching. Again, think of a cougar as a large house cat. You've probably seen all these telltale signs when your house cat is stalking a bird or a mouse. This is what cougars do, but on a larger scale. So understand that all of these body posturing, this is all an offensive display. It literally means the cat is trying to figure out if there's a potential meal in front of it. And what your job is to do, if you ever see this, is to immediately nip it in the bud and let them know that you are not on their menu. And so what do? How do you react if you encounter this cougar? Well, let's take it by a couple of different situations. First off, if you're undetected by the cougar, you sneak up on a cougar and that cougar has no idea that you're there, first thing you got to do is wake up, because you're dreaming. That's never going to happen. These cats are extremely aware of their surroundings, and they're not going to be snuck up on. Now, the reason I put that in is because once in a while, if you're a bird watcher, hunter, you're out there and you're sitting still for a long, long time, you could have a cat wander into your area that may be unaware of you. If that happens and you're uncomfortable being in that same area of a cat, back away, leave the area. If the cat doesn't know you're there, you could probably get away before the cat realizes that you're there. Now, say you are out there, you're on a trail, you're relatively close, you spot a cat that has not run away, and you see it crouching there. Its tail twitching, it's in that stalking type of mode. Understand that in almost every single situation, it detects movement, and it's trying to figure out if there's a potential meal that's coming towards them. It doesn't mean that automatically it sees a human and it wants to attack a human. It sees an animal and is trying to figure out if that animal is its next meal. So they will automatically go into this stealth mode, this predatory mode. If that happens, you got to get them out of that mode as quickly as possible. So all you do, you make noise, you wave your arms, you throw rocks. You let them know, hey, I'm not a deer, I'm not an elk, I'm not something you normally eat, get out of here. The one thing, and I cannot stress this enough, You never, ever, ever, ever run with this predatory mode because that triggers an instant reaction in them to chase. Now, I will tell you about some videos, and I'll send you some videos, but if you run, literally they will automatically chase. Their brain it literally gets disconnected and their body goes into motion. And so whatever you do, don't run. You just keep your wits about you and literally think, hey, I got to let this cat know I am not a prey item. And so that's why you're waving your arms, you're making noise, you're throwing rocks. Now, here's something to keep in mind. Remember, when a cat is trying to stalk its prey, think about watching Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom, and you watch that lion try to sneak up on that gazelle. Every time that gazelle looks away, the lion gets closer. Whenever the gazelle looks up and looks in the lion's direction, what do? They stop. They know they've been spotted. So whenever you encounter a cougar, if you ever encounter a cougar, make sure you don't take your eyes off of it. You stare at it because just looking at it should slow that advance. And I've got to mention something because someone who's going to take the class tonight asked about wearing a hat or something with those eyes painted on the back. There's been no studies. Obviously, there's not much. There's no way to study that because there's not enough sample data. But just understanding the basic behavior of those cats not wanting to be seen, if you have something that gives the appearance that they're being looked at, it usually slows their advance. And so I'm not going to say it's going to work. I'm not going to say it's not going to work. But just understand that a cat thinking it's being watched usually does not make that approach. So who knows if that will work or not. But there's also much documentation about some coloration in moths that have these big eyeballs that their wings will flare, and it's to scare away birds that are trying to sneak up on it. So anyway, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on there, but remember, if you see a cat, don't take your eyes off of it. You're going to have to make a you're going to have to make a retreat, but you back away slowly, you yell at it, you be aggressive. You let that cat know that you are not on their diet or on their menu. What happens if you're ever attacked? Heaven forbid that ever happens, but you have to understand you have to fight back with all your might because your life depends on it. Now, I will tell you, remember the size of these cats, especially those females. They're 100, 120 pounds. There have been many, many instances where the person has fought back and has fought a cougar off. Now, I will tell you, usually cats will prey on these smaller people. So if you have children, you make sure you pick up your children. They're looking for that smaller prey item, the one that's going to be easier to take down. And so there's many instances. 2 years ago, not far from me, up in Colorado, a cougar grabbed an 11-year-old boy, and the mother was able to beat the cat away from her son. And so you stand a chance when you fight back. So anyway, this is what you do should you ever encounter a cougar. They are predators. They're looking for a meal. Your main goal here is don't let them know that you're a meal, or don't even pretend to be a meal. So in almost every single situation, as soon as you announce yourself, let it be known that you're a human and you're gonna attack him if he attacks you. That cat's gonna skedaddle in almost every situation. So with that, I was gonna stop after the cougar stuff, but I got to make sure I get through all the bear stuff too. So I'm gonna switch gears really quickly and talk. I'll try to go through this faster. We're going to talk a little bit about black bear biology. Now, most people on this class, or in this class, they're going to be dealing with black bears. So I'm not going to talk too much about grizzlies. I could answer questions later about grizzlies, but just understand black bears come in all sorts of different colors. So just because you encounter a bear that's brown doesn't necessarily make it a brown bear or a grizzly. It could very well be a black bear. But just like cougars, they're not as big as people think. They're much bigger than cougars, but they're not this mythical creature that a lot of the public thinks bears are. A black bear male will weigh 200. A really, really big one can get up to 400 pounds. But females are usually in that 150 to 200 pound mark, which is not as big as most people think. Again, they have huge home ranges because they're following the food source. But this is where bears get a little bit different. They're omnivores. They're not carnivores. They will eat meat, but they also eat a lot of vegetable matter. Because of that hibernation, and they've got to gain weight, they got to restore weight that they lost during the hibernation, they got to pack on pounds, they are eating machines, and this dictates a lot of their behavior. So everyone understands that bears hibernate. We do teach another wildlife class about hibernation. It's really, really cool in black bears, but I won't talk about that. Their senses, it's hit or miss. Cats have senses above and beyond in every aspect. Now, a bear's eyesight is about the same as ours. A lot of times people will see a bear stand on its hind legs thinking it's ready to attack. Oftentimes it's the bear standing up to get a better view because they don't have the greatest eyesight in the world. Their hearing is above what a human can hear, but the thing with bears that's unparalleled, they have the greatest sense of smell in the entire mammal kingdom. Far better than any cat or cougar, far better than any other mammal out there. If you attend one of my bear classes, we get deep into this topic because it's absolutely fascinating. But just understand, we all know, excuse me, we all know what we can smell as a human. And there's been studies done counting the number of scent receptors or olfactory receptors inside the lining of the nose. And we know that a dog can smell more than a human. A typical dog usually has 100 times more receptors, so they have 100 times better sense of smell. Now, the dog with the greatest sense of smell is a bloodhound. They can smell about 300 times better than a human. This is where it gets awesome or crazy. Bears can smell 7 times better than any bloodhound. So when you do all that math, a bear's sense of smell is about 2,000 times stronger than us. Again, attend one of my bear lectures because I'll go in a whole lot more detail, but understand their sense of smell drives their behavior because they're hungry, they're looking for food, and they use their nose to find food. So what's a close encounter with a bear? This is a whole lot different than with cougars because, well, let me explain. You could have a surprise encounter with a bear. You could turn the corner and the bear is face to face with you. That's not a good situation. Another one is you could walk up either on a carcass. Doesn't have to be a carcass. It could be a berry patch. It could be a dumpster. You could be at your house walking outside in bear country and there's a bear in the garbage can. And so anytime you're around a food source, that could be a close encounter with a bear. Another one is a mother with cubs. Everyone knows this. This could be a really high-risk situation when you encounter a mother with cubs. Another one, and this is, again, understanding their behavior, they have their mating season in usually early summertime, goes through midsummer. If you encounter 2 adult bears together, they could be in the middle of their mating season. You don't want to get in between those. And last but not least, here's that topic of dogs again. Again, I will never tell you to not hike with your dog, but understand that many dogs will chase a bear away. You see this Karelian bear dog in this picture, but a lot of folks love going to their campsite with this thing. This dog has a heart of gold and will try chasing a bear. Usually the bear only takes a couple of steps, turns around and realizes what's chasing them, and they go running after the dog. So just understand that when you are with dogs, especially when the dogs are off leash, you could amplify a situation if you have a bear encounter or a cougar encounter. So look at everything that I just showed you. Those are all defensive situations for a bear. They're not on the offensive, they're on the defensive. You're either in their personal space or they're defending their food. Mother with cubs defending their offspring. The mating season, they're defending their mate. Or, again, their personal space with a dog. A bear is going to react in a defensive manner. Now, bears can also go on the offensive. And you have to be able to differentiate between a defensive situation and an offensive situation. So that offensive situation is where the bear is seeking food. Think of the cat. They're trying to find out whether or not they can get their next meal. So they could smell something in your backpack or smell something on your clothes or smell something, and they're trying to get closer to find out if there's food available there. Worst case scenario, they're seeking you. This is that true predatory behavior. This is what's the most dangerous with bears, is when they're seeking you. But this doesn't happen all too often. In fact, it almost rarely ever happens, so you should probably never have to worry about that. But there are these two different situations with bears. You have these defensive encounters and these offensive encounters. Now, as far as reading body posture and vocalization, if you have a bear encounter, remember, it's all about the situational. It's a situational communication that they go through. So you just have to figure out really quick, what kind of situation are you in with this bear? And again, it's defensive or offensive. Now, it's really, really easy to differentiate literally within a split second, because you have to understand the bear's intention in a defensive situation, it wants to increase the distance between you and him. Say you surprise the bear. He wants to get away, you want to get away. He wants to increase that distance between the two of you. That's a defensive situation. Mother with cubs, they want to get away. Food source, they want you to get away from their food source. Now, in that offensive situation, they're trying to close the distance. They want to get closer to you to figure out if there's food or a food reward. And so it's really easy. Is the bear trying to get closer to you, or does he want to get away from you? And their behavior is much different in these two situations. So in this defensive mode, if you surprise a mother with cubs, or you surprise a bear at close range, the first thing they're going to try to do is tell you, hey, I'm upset. You're too close to me. I don't like you being this close. And there's some body posturing and vocalizations they do. They could pop their jaws. And I have videos. I'm going to send videos to everyone here. They'll pop their jaws. They'll smack their lips back and forth. It's a sign to say, hey, I'm nervous. You're too close. Another thing is huffing. They exhale really quickly. They'll go. It's their way of saying they're nervous. You're too close to them. Sometimes they'll moan. The best way for me to describe this is, think of Chewbacca, and when Chewbacca moans, it's sort of like that. It's not as long, but it'll be a moaning in that tone. Another thing, and this is awesome, because what a bear will do, they'll be so nervous, they're so upset you're too close to them, they lose control of their facial muscles. And so what they might do is they might yawn. And I can't tell you how many times a bear would yawn and the people see this yawn, and what's the reaction? Oh, look how cute, it's tired. It's not tired, it's nervous. The other one I love is the salivating. The bear is so nervous, it begins to lose control, starts salivating. How many in the general public will be close enough to a bear and see the bear salivating? And what's the reaction? The bear wants to eat me. And that's not what the bear is saying at all. It's literally saying, you're too close, please, please get away. If you do not get away, the bear is going to up his game. He's going to try to tell you to back up. And so what they might do is a bluff charge. They might take a couple of steps to you, just trying to get you to back up. It's very effective. Another thing they might do is what we call ground swatting, where what they'll do is they'll find a bush or a log or even the ground, and they'll beat it up. Because what they're trying to say is, if you don't back away, this is what I'm going to do to you. And these are all behaviors, very, very telltale signs of what's going on in the bear's mind. I have videos that I'll send you all of these examples. Now, what if you encounter a bear in this offensive mode? Remember, he's hungry, he's looking for food. He's trying to tell you he's looking for food. Now, completely different. They're not going to make noise, they're not going to pop their jaws, they're not going to do any vocalizations, they're really, really quiet. This is where they become like a cat. They're in this predatory mode. They're stalking. They'll keep this constant pursuit. They'll follow you wherever you go. Another one is they'll keep their head low and swaying. Again, it's that predatory type of behavior. If you see a bear doing this, this should hopefully get the hair on the back of your neck to stand up and say, hey, something's going on here. This bear's trying to get close to me. Another thing, their eyes will remain locked on you. Again, they're trying to size you up to say, hey, is there a meal that I can get out of this encounter? Whether or not you throw your pack or whatever, which we don't want you to do, but it's really easy to tell what's going on in a bear's mind, either these defensive behaviors or these offensive behaviors. And again, I have videos. Everyone in this class, I'm going to send you a link to these videos so you can see what we're talking about. So how do you react if you encounter a bear in these situations? Now, remember, if you have this defensive situation where you have a mother with cubs, or you surprise it at close range, or you're by their food source, he wants you to get away. And so the first thing you do, you don't pose as a threat. You don't act all aggressive if there's a mother with cubs there. You're like, whoa, bear, whoa, I'm sorry. You let them know that you invaded their space. You're ready to get out of their space. So you slowly back away. You talk softly to it. You talk firmly to it, but you talk softly. You don't get aggressive. If the bear comes at you, you try to stop the bear. Whoa, bear, I'm sorry. I'm in your space. You keep backing up. And remember, they want you out of their space, and in almost every situation, they're going to let you get out of their space. Now, if contact occurs, this is the tough part. You surprise a bear at close range or a mother with cubs, they immediately see a threat, and sometimes they react immediately. And so if contact occurs, we advise the first thing you do is drop down, cover the back of your neck, because all they want to do is eliminate that threat. A good friend of mine, Karen Williams, was a marathon runner in northern New Mexico, and she was attacked. She ran into a mother with cubs at close range, and she was immediately attacked. The more she fought back, the more that mother fought her. And as soon as she kept quiet and curled up and just posed no threat whatsoever, the mother bear got off her, grabbed the cubs, and left. Now, if the attack continues and the bear is not backing off, this is where you got to fight back with all your might. But remember, in a defensive situation, they want to get out of there. And so if there's an immediate threat, they're just trying to eliminate the threat so they can move on. Now, if you do encounter a bear in an offensive situation where they're closing the distance, they're trying to get closer to you, you don't let them. This is where you get mad. You see a bear coming close to you, just like the cougar, you let them know you're in charge, you're the boss, and you're not the next meal. And so you got to make sure you don't pose as a meal. You never back away. You don't talk quietly. You get aggressive. And so you got to get yourself out of that situation. You back away. You never turn and run just like the cat. But if the bear continues to come at you, you shout like you mean it. You let him know if he comes closer to you, you're going to eat him. You yell. You throw things. You act the dominant animal. And if contact ever occurs in this situation, you have to fight back. That bear is trying to get food out of you. You got to make sure he never does. And I know this is really tough to do, but this is the best reactions in all of these situations. So, with that, that's all I'm going to teach you about bears and cougars as far as their behavior, their biology. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to hold all questions till the very end. The next thing, and these next two things are really quick. That acronym, ASK, you have to be able to identify your attractants. If you're afraid of bears and cougars, don't carry or don't do anything that's going to attract these animals to where you're at. So you have to know what attracts them. Obviously, if you're in bear country, everyone knows garbage attracts bears, garbage kills bears, but these bears have a tremendous sense of smell. They're going to be lured to these garbage, these strong smelling areas. So obviously these dumpsters are going to attract bears. Another thing that people aren't very mindful, especially if they live in bear and cougar country, they put food out for other animals, whether or not it's bird seed for the birds or dog food for their pets. It's food. If you're putting food out for those animals, you're putting food out for bears. You're going to attract bears to this type of situation. But what if you're camping? What if you're going on a backcountry hike? Everyone carries food. That's fine. We want you to do that. And in most situations, everyone knows that when they have a campfire, they have a cookout, you're going to put up aromas that are going to attract a bear. You don't want to keep those smells in your campsite, though. And so this is why we're always telling you to store your food outside of your campsite. And most people are really good with cleaning up their campsite. But what do they do when they're all done? They crawl into the tent and they have little Susie brush her teeth with blueberry toothpaste. That too is an attractant for a bear. Same thing, you might have items that you don't even consider food sources like chapstick or lotions or anything like that. Anything that's aromatic to you is going to smell like candy or food to a bear. So you got to make sure none of these things are there in your campsite to attract a bear into your campsite. Because remember, bears rely on their nose. They're always eating, they're always feeding, they're always using their nose to find food. Make sure they're not going to find food in your campsite. So what about when you're in cougar country? Remember, these animals, these cougars, are predators. They're always looking for that next meal. Now remember, their main source of food is deer and other small mammals. They're looking for that smaller food item. And so it's always really, really important, especially if you're hiking with young children, keep the young children close by. Don't let them go running 100 yards up the trail, because what do you think a cougar sees? This is an attractant. It's not a smell. This is a visual attractant. If they see a young child running down a trail, what does that cougar see? He sees a potential snack running by. And if they're lying in wait, this could be a very dangerous situation, so you don't want that to happen. Another thing, especially if you're camping with really young children, you might not be in the back country, but you could be in the front country at a campsite. A lot of people bring young children. Young children have a tendency to cry. If you've ever heard of animal in distress, whether or not it's a rabbit or any other small animal, it lets out a high-pitched squeal, very much like a young child. So if you're anywhere in cougar country and you have a child that's crying unconsolably, no longer is it a smell attractant. It's not a visual attractant. It's an auditory attractant. So understand that some of these things that you do, you may not have ever paid attention to it before, but now that you have this class, you're like, hey, we better do something different, because this could be an attractant to one of these animals we don't want to have an encounter with. And so as long as you identify the attractants, you'll be good. So whatever you do, just make sure you don't do anything that's going to attract animals to where you don't want them. That's all I'm going to say about the attractants. And so last but not least, and again, this will be relatively quick, what do you do to stay safe? It's really, really simple, folks. First off, there's some equipment that you can carry to stay safe. First and foremost, especially with bear encounters, but it also works with cougar encounters, you see the item on the left is bear spray. It's designed to deter grizzlies, and it's very effective. It shoots a long distance. This is not the stuff you buy at Walmart, which is called pepper spray. This is counter assault, or another thing that has bear spray on it. It's designed to shoot a much further distance. This is what you'd want to carry if you are afraid of encountering a bear or a cougar, especially if you're in grizzly country. Another thing that people oftentimes carry are these bear bells. You'll hear all sorts of stories about their effectiveness. I don't care either way if you want to carry them or you don't carry them. The key thing, what they're trying to do, is warn an animal of your approach. Now, those bear bells, if they're worn in one of these really popular areas where there's just a ton of hikers and everyone has bear bells and everyone's ringing, those animals don't pay any attention to it. But if you're in a backcountry area where there's not a lot of human intrusion, those bells could serve a purpose. So those are things you can buy. Those are second rate compared to this next thing, and you cannot buy this next thing. It's your brain. This is what is going to keep you safe in almost every single situation. And so the key thing that your brain does, it controls your behavior. And your behavior is of utmost importance, because this is what keeps you safe, front country, back country, wherever you are. So first and foremost, what do you do? How does your brain keep you safe? Obviously, you got to follow safety guidelines. National Park Service, Forest Service, all these agencies that control a lot of these public lands will put out safety guidelines. They'll teach you, or they'll tell you how you're supposed to properly hang your food. They're not doing it because they want to make it a pain in the butt for you to go camping there. This is what keeps you safe when you're in bear country and cougar country. Follow those safety guidelines. Many times, besides teaching you how to hang their food, they will close a trail. They'll say, beware, there's a mother with cub feeding in this area, or there's been a cougar sighted in this area within the last few days. Those are warning signs to tell you, hey, maybe we should go to another area if I don't want to have this cougar or bear encounter. So follow the safety guidelines. That's in your brain. That's nothing you can buy. But this is where it becomes very important. And this is pretty much where you will stay safe no matter what you do when you're in bear and cougar country. You got to be aware of your surroundings. The situational awareness is so very important. I taught you about what cougars like, what bears like, what makes them tick. Now you got to apply that knowledge when you're in the backcountry or wherever you're in the outdoors. So if you're afraid of running into a grizzly, the picture on the left, everyone's seen pictures of the grizzlies feeding in the streams when the salmon are coming up the stream. If you're camping by a river in grizzly country that has salmon swimming up, is that a smart move? Heck no. You're camping in their, literally in their kitchen. But let's talk about animals you're likely to encounter. The bears. If you're in a field, or if you see a field of blackberries or acorns in the fall, and there's lots of natural foods there, don't be camping there. You're literally camping in that animal's kitchen. This is your brain telling you what to do. The picture on the right gives you an idea of where you want to pitch your tent. Understand that a lot of these animals move under the cover of darkness or in thick vegetation. You don't want to put your tent in a really thick area because those animals use it as a travel corridor. And so the last thing you want is a cat or a bear to stumble into your campsite, not even realizing that you're there. And so situational awareness. Hey, I shouldn't pitch my tent here, or we shouldn't camp here because this is a bad situation. Normally I ask the crew out here what these two pictures give a really good example of, but since we're not person to person here, what these two pictures show is where you could have a close encounter, where you could surprise an animal because you have very, very limited sight distance. So if you're in the east or even in the west, there's some areas that are really, really thick, especially the Pacific Northwest. If you're walking down a trail and it gets really tight with vegetation, you whistle, you talk to other people, you sing your favorite song because you don't want to surprise an animal at close range. Same thing with the picture on the right. This canyon area, it's gorgeous, it's beautiful. Cougars love it because, remember, they're ambush predators. They lie in wait. Now, if they hear an animal coming, just walking down the trail, they lie in ambush. But if you're walking down the trail and you're in this area and you're singing your favorite song, right away it's going to tell them, hey, this animal that's coming down the trail is not something I want to go after. And they're going to head that other way. So it's the situational awareness which is of utmost importance. But by and large, this is the most important safety factor for today. So we covered a ton of ground. Usually these are broken out into two different talks, but I put them all together for you. Just want to summarize. You want to hike or recreate safely in bear and cougar country? All you have to do is ask. Remember, know what attracts those animals. We just went over that really quick. Know what to do to stay safe. It's really simple, folks. Use your brain. That's what's going to keep you safe. And then be knowledgeable about that animal you're concerned about. Bears and cougars, I taught you a lot today. But hopefully, with this understanding, I didn't want anyone to take notes. I just want you to sit back, relax, and say, hey, that makes a lot of sense. And boy, oh boy, the more you think about this, the easier it gets. The more knowledgeable you'll be, the more confident you'll be. And then next time you're out in the woods, you don't even have to worry about encountering a bear or cougar. If you don't want to, you probably won't. But if you do, you'll know exactly what you need to do. So before I get to the questions, I got to give photo credits where they're due. Some amazing people give me the photos for these classes. So by all means, look up these guys. They're fantastic. Now, I will tell you, many of you already have taken a number of these classes. We do normally teach these about different wildlife classes. They're normally about $15, but they're taught by different instructors from all over North America. Fantastic information. For the cost of a premiere movie ticket, you get to spend an hour or two with a professional learning about something that is near and dear to your heart. So look up, if you've never been to the Wildlife For You website, you can find all the classes there. Another really easy thing for you to do is follow Wildlife For You on Facebook. This is where we announce all the classes. Many of you found us through Facebook. But mark your calendars. These are some classes coming up that you might be interested. In about 10 days, I'll be teaching a class. This was requested by a lot of our followers to teach a class about foxes because they love foxes. So I'm doing one about Sly as a fox. It's just all about the foxes of North America. This is a really good one. This was that one about black bear hibernation. Stephanie Dennis, she is a human bear dynamics person, fantastic, extremely intelligent. She's teaching a class about black bear hibernation. That's in early October. Then I'm going to be doing one on timber wolves and how they're icons of wild America in November 13th. And then one, many of you know and love Kim Delosier. He was the head biologist for Great Smoky Mountain National Park. He's handled more bears than most people have ever seen in their lives. And he's going to be doing a special class about bear encounters. Don't have all the details about that, but that'll be coming out the week after Thanksgiving. So keep an eye out for those classes if they pique your interest. We'd love to have you back. As many of you know, we give these classes all the time, and I can't thank you enough for being wonderful students and participants of this Wildlife for You program. We are here for you to teach you about wildlife, teach you about the great outdoors. And with that, I got to take a break, take a drink, and I'm going to thank you. And if you have any questions, I'm going to stick around as long as you guys are here to answer all your questions. All right, I am going to expand my chat box so I can make sure I cover all these questions here. Thanks for, that was a nonstop talking for about an hour. Sorry it took so long, but we did cover a lot of material. All right, Hey Charlotte, I did see your comment about too bad not talking about grizzlies. We will have a separate grizzlies class. Obviously a lot to learn, a lot to talk about, and so we want to dedicate the whole class to grizzlies. All right, Gretchen asked if I've encountered a cougar. Now, I spent most of my career in Tennessee. I was the big game program coordinator, so I was their cougar coordinator. We didn't have cougars in Tennessee up until like about 2 years ago. And so most of my career, I didn't live in an area where there was cougars. Having moved to New Mexico, I've been involved with some cougar studies where we actually go in. We have some cougars that are radio collared, and as soon as they make a kill, we go in, look at the kill site, find out what the cougar killed, and collect all this data. I've done a number of those, but I have yet to encounter a cougar on the trail, which I want to. I want to see a cougar live and in person. But that goes to show you, we know that we're in the territory of these cougars. We know they're nearby, and we still don't see them. That is a great indication of how much these cougars want to stay away from us. These cougar-human interactions are extremely, extremely rare, because when they detect us coming, they head the other way. Okay, Debbie, we love hiking in North Carolina mountains. Are cougars found in the mountains of western North Carolina? All right, I'm the wildlife biologist here. If you ask the average Joe, I swear 90% of the average Joes will tell you yes, they're in North Carolina. They're not. Cougars are a western species. They used to be all over North America. We do teach another cougar class. They used to be all over North America, but they've been extirpated from the East Coast. Pretty much all the cats now are in the western half of the United States. Having said that, they have been moving eastward. They're still, their furthest range where their year-round residence is pretty much the Midwest. Now, every once in a while you get a cougar. We had one that went from the Dakotas all the way to Connecticut in 2011. We had another cat that entered Tennessee and walked across the state of Tennessee for about a year back in 2015 and 16. So year-round resident cougar populations do not exist on the East Coast outside of a small population in the Everglades, the Florida Panthers, which is a misnomer. But that doesn't mean that a cougar does not make a long-distance travel. North Carolina is a far, far, far away from any existing populations, so it'd be highly doubtful you have any cougars there. But hopefully within the next few decades, these western cougars are going to move eastward and reestablish their populations. Just so you know, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service declared the eastern cougar extinct a couple of years ago. They were looking for decades, and there's no evidence of any cougars in that eastern portion of the U.S. outside of the Florida population. Okay, Shelly has a question, and this is interesting because I haven't heard, and if anyone wants to chime in, she says, some people say the bear bells attract cougars. Is that true? Now, I seriously doubt they would attract a cougar. And I'm wondering, I'm guessing where it comes from is you see house cats, and lots of people have toys, yarn, bells, things that the cats will play with. But that is a domesticated animal that has already lost tons of its natural features. I would say that those bells probably don't attract cats. There may be an instance where um, the cat would hear it. I, it could be that they don't understand what that sound is, and they may stick around to find out. But as soon as they see that bell is attached to the sneaker or the hiking stick of a human, I doubt that cat is going to be attracted anymore. And so it could be a curiosity thing from the beginning, but as far as actually drawing the cougar to a human, I doubt that's ever happened. Very good question. I'll see if I can look more into that. Very good question, though. Well, thank you for the compliments. I just do what I do because I love it so much. Okay, Stephanie Sampson says, I have two small dogs I hike with. I've heard that small dogs can be an attractant for bears and cougars. Is this true? Um, it could be true. Reason being, now dogs for the most part, especially the larger breeds, they'll chase away a bear or a cougar in most situations. Now those smaller breeds, they have the heart of a lion, and they will try to chase these animals. They'll bark at it. The problem is, especially with the cougar, if they see a really small dog, they see a prey item. Remember, a cougar will feed on a coyote, especially if it's smaller than a coyote. So they see prey items. And so those smaller dogs could definitely be an attractant for something like a cougar, especially if they're not barking. If they're just wandering around campsite, that cougar is going to eye it up and think it's going to have an easy meal. So be mindful of that. Again, I will never tell you don't go hiking or camping with your dogs. I do it all the time, but you just have to understand what you might be getting yourself into. Bears, same thing. Now a small dog, bears just don't want to put up with stuff. And so if there's a small dog barking at it, it's usually going to go the other way. But if that small dog becomes aggressive and is chasing the bear might get a little PO'd and could turn on that small dog. And so just be mindful. By all means, hike with your small dogs, camp with your small dogs, but understand if you're in bear and cougar country, it could lead to a more intense situation. So obviously we always talk about having those animals on a leash where you can get them back, because once that dog sees a bear or a cougar, it's very difficult to control that dog. And I hate putting my dogs on a leash. I had to just a couple of weeks ago. We encountered a bear. Fortunately, I saw the bear before my dogs did, and I was able to put the leash on both dogs, and they were none the wiser. But just be mindful of that situation or the predicament you could get yourself into. All right. Thank you for all the comments. Let's see if I missed anything. Okay, Shirley asks, do you think the people attacked in Oregon and Washington could have encountered the cougars and did the one thing they shouldn't be trying to run and trigger the attack? First thing I want to do is, anytime there's attack, it's a terrible, terrible situation, and prayers go out to the families of all involved. Now, to say whether or not they did something wrong, I don't know enough. In fact, I don't think anybody will ever know the situation with this most recent attack. They're going to try to piece together what happened, and so until then, who knows what happened with that woman who was attacked up in Washington. Now, I will tell you that the mountain biker that was killed, if you heard the story, and again, if the story that has circulated is true, the cat attacked the first. There's two mountain bikers, and the cat attacked the first mountain biker. The other mountain biker got scared and ran. And when he ran, it triggered the cat to release the first person and go after him. And so that situation, you never want to second guess, but that just hammers home the point of never run whenever you're, especially with a cougar, because they are programmed to chase. And who knows what would have happened if that person didn't run, whether or not they would have been able to fight that cougar off, we don't know. And unfortunately, in many of these situations, we'll never know. But you just got to understand when you do have these encounters, what your best course of action is to be. Obviously, running is never a good course of action. But like with a bear, you need to know if you need to act aggressive or if you back away slowly. And so hopefully after attending this webinar, you're armed with some of that information. Debbie, I hope I answered your question about the original attack. Okay, Heather asks an awesome question. She says, I heard previously that a charge by a bear is normally a scare tactic, which coincides with a defensive maneuver. However, as this is defensive, should a person be large and aggressive to ward off the charge attack? Heather, I'm going to send you, as well as everyone on here, links to some videos. And one of the things you have to understand that in most situations, in almost every situation, it's going to be a bluff charge. Literally, the bear is getting aggravated because you're not leaving them alone, and they'll charge at you. But understand, a charge is not them running 30 yards and stopping right in front of you. A bluff charge is usually only 1 or 2 steps. They'll kind of look at you, and then they move really quickly in your direction. And what do? Right away, you're backing up. That's what they want you to do. They want you to back up. And so I have these videos that show multiple bluff charges, and it's just the bear trying to force your hand, saying, get away from me. And so if there's ever a full-on charge, that is usually when the bear is, and in most situations, that's a grizzly. It's not, black bears don't do this full-on attack charge. That is pretty much a grizzly type of action. Now, again, I will have a grizzly class that will go into all the details about what to do, what not to do. But for the most part, this bluff charge is only a couple of steps. Very effective. It will get you to back up. But I'll send you videos. Now, whenever they do that, they're telling you to back up. That's where you don't get aggressive. You're like, oh, I'm sorry, I made a mistake, and you back out, and they give you all the room in the world for you to get out of there. Okay, I'm glad Sandy brought this up. Sandy says, about 3 years ago in December, a cougar was killed in Kentucky by a wildlife agent. This was the first cougar sighted in a state since the Civil War. Dog had the cougar treed. There have been sightings in western Tennessee. With the fear of cougars, do you think they can expand east? I was the chief of wildlife in Tennessee when the Kentucky officers killed the cougar in Kentucky. And I'll be the first to admit, I was pretty upset. As a state wildlife agency, we're mandated to protect wildlife, and I could not understand why the agents killed that cat. And a long investigation ensued. And literally when they concluded that investigation, and it wasn't known right away, but they did the necropsy on that animal that was killed in Kentucky. And it was a cat of Western origin, but it was extremely healthy. There was no wear on its pads. It was 5 years old, and I'll tell you why that's important. But there's no parasites inside that cat. This is what was leading investigators to think that was not a wild cat, because a wild cat is eating meat that is sitting out there for a week on end. As they're feeding off that, there's tons and tons of parasites in these animals that they kill and they consume. And so a wild cat, it's a healthy wild cat, is loaded with parasites. This particular cat killed in Kentucky did not have parasites. And so that was leading investigators to believe it was someone's pet that they were taking care of. Now, I mentioned it was 5 years old. Usually those cats from the west that are expanding their range and moving eastward, they're getting kicked. These are the cats that are getting kicked out of the home territories because they're young cats. They're trying to find their own home range, and they can't find it, so they go on these long walks. And so that cat that was killed in Connecticut, I think, was 2 years old. Um, so usually these cats that wander long distances are really young cats. They're yearling or a couple years old. That cat in Kentucky was 5.5 years old. And so it was an older, more mature cat that there's no reason it would go wandering that far. And so Kentucky officials finally concluded after, I think, 6 months, 9 months investigation, there was no evidence to support that it was a wild cat that wandered over there. And so I forgave the officers. Um, but the second part of your question, it drives me nuts. This is one of the reasons I do these wildlife webinars. The general public is so misinformed about wildlife. It's absurd. And so trying to change that, I know I'm not going to do it by myself, but this fear that the folks on the East Coast have of cougars, it's going to take an extra long time before cougars become established on the East Coast. Folks in the West, they've lived with cougars their whole life. They don't panic. People in the East panic. So there's going to be cougars shot. The cougar in Tennessee disappeared after less than a year. It just up and disappeared. It could have died naturally. It could have been killed. Who knows? We don't know what happened to the cat. That cat disappeared. But education of the public is of utmost importance. I will tell you the thing that is most annoying is we have news stations that are perpetuating some of these scare tactics. There was a couple of horses that were killed, they're young, or ponies, that were killed in Kentucky, and the news agency is blaming it on a cougar, which Kentucky doesn't have cougars. And so it's unfortunate, the misinformation that's out there, and if I could help and correct that, that's what I'm going to do. That's what I'm passionate about. Okay, Stephanie asks, do you recommend hiking with a weapon, especially a gun, or specifically a gun? I hear this advice all the time, especially as a solo female hiker, but I hate guns. I'll never tell you to carry a gun. And in fact, if you're worried, well, first off, the animal that you as a solo female hiker would have to worry about is another human. But if you are worried about bears or cougars, and you remember, your brain is going to keep you safe first and foremost. But if you need that backup plan, bear spray. The reason I'm telling you, a lot of people say carry a gun. The problem with a gun is you can miss and you will miss. I've got a personal experience where I had a bear coming at me and I discharged a gun twice, and guess what? I missed twice. And so you can, unfortunately, the bear changed its course of direction, but I will tell you that bear spray is far more effective than a gun, simply because that bear spray will put out a cloud and you're less likely to miss. And I forget the statistics, it's like 92, 94% effective at stopping a charging bear. That's tremendously good odds. And so you carry bear spray first and foremost if you really want that backup plan. And I will tell you to carry it. If you're in bear and cougar country, keep it on your pack, keep it easily accessible, because remember, your brain is keeping you safe. But your brain could give you this advanced warning. So if you're walking into an area and if you encounter a fresh, say, a mule deer kill that's been cached or covered up, you know that there's a cougar in the area. You get that bear spray out. You be ready. This is where your brain is first and foremost, but that bear spray is the next best thing. So by all means, I would carry that over a gun, because a gun, if you're not skilled with it, it's not very effective. It does no good if you're missing. Debbie, have I heard about TWRA saying cougars are in Tennessee? Confirmed sightings in West and Middle. I debate this and fight this all the time. TWRA confirmed sightings. A cat in the fall of 2015 showed up in northwest Tennessee and traveled all the way to almost Middle Tennessee to the Tennessee River corridor. That one cat was photographed 9 times, and TWRA confirmed those photos. I had left literally 2 weeks before this cat showed up, and I was in charge of that program. And so TWRA has confirmed the photos, but if you read their website, they do not Um, they even say it's going to be a long time before cougars reestablish in Tennessee. So that was a lone cat. You can't say with a lone cat that cougars now live in Tennessee until you have breeding, reproducing females that are giving birth to kittens. You don't have a cougar population. You have a couple of strays here and there, and most of those states in the east, they don't have any cougar populations. They might have a lone cat that wanders through here now and then, but there's no cougar populations east of that Mississippi. Irene, yes, REI will definitely have bear spray for you if you want to pick it up. I will try my best to keep educating. Now, I know we've been on here for a long time, an hour and a half. I'll stay as long as you have questions, but again, I can't thank you enough for caring about wildlife and trying to learn more about it and educate yourself. It's truly wonderful. I wish more people were like that. I'm just going back to make sure I answered everyone's questions. Again, if you type something that I missed, or if you think of something in a couple hours, tomorrow, next week, email me. That's what we're here for. All right. It is Sunday evening. I've talked for quite some time. You guys were pretty awesome, and I can't thank you enough for joining in. What I'm going to do, I'm going to stop the recording. Anyone that receives this recording that has questions that couldn't join us live, by all means, get a hold of me. Either send me an email or a text or instant message, any way you want to ask that question. I will also try to send the videos of the cougar behavior and bear behavior. Again, it's just gravy on top so you have a better understanding of these creatures when you're out there hiking. So, you guys are awesome. I'm going to sign out and thank you one last time.